I need to ask millennials, why are your kids so awful?
I don't have kids, but I get to work with yours. And let me tell you.
Having to teach and work with you guys as children has been the most traumatic experience of my life. I don't know what to do.
This is again!
iPad parents. Now, before we dive into the iPad kids, we need to talk about the iPad parents. These are the parents are the ones that obviously allow their kids to have the iPad. A lot of the times, unlimited screen time, the volume's up at the restaurant, the whole nine. We're gonna talk about those parents because I genuinely want to try and understand why they are the way they are. And all of this spawned from me picking up dinner 2 weeks ago, and I walked in this restaurant, it's a little local hibachi spot, and I'm promising maybe like 10 of them tables. There were iPads everywhere. Kids were using their mama's phone. My anxiety was off the charts. I'm sitting there waiting on my food. I'm hearing the chefs clinking all the food, which is fine. The restaurant music, again, fine, modest. But then like 10 different iPads, Coco Melon, this song, this game, this clinking, this flashing screen. And I'm just like, what the hell is going on? What's your reasoning for this? And a lot of them just, honestly, they just said it so they can get a break. Like the iPad is the new babysitter.
You stupid.
Be honest and be real. Millennials, they have gone through a lot. The economy is horrible. It's crippling debt for most families. We were raised on false promises. Oh, just get a degree and you'll be fine. You'll be able to get a good job and a house and have all this money. Like none of that is real. We are living in an entire different economy and world than what we were raised in, let alone what they were raised in. Hell, there was a meme going around talking about my grandparents' house they bought for an acorn and now it's worth $1.3 million. Like, some of that stuff is actually real. And the way things are priced right now, it's no wonder why some millennial parents are just completely tuned out and just stressed beyond belief. And now here we are where our entire life is online. That's new for millennials. Some parents are just blind to the damage that this is doing because they're being damaged too. The parents are scrolling on TikTok. They're scrolling on Facebook. They're shopping online. Like they are in the device just as much as the kid is themselves. And while all this may be the case, it can't be an excuse to neglect your child and let alone even neglect yourself from even growing and prospering and becoming a better parent for your child. And understanding that all these studies coming out and how these children are behaving, the screens are not helping. It's just not an excuse to be it's not an excuse to be a bad parent. It's just not. But then that gets into, well, a lot of these parents didn't even want to be a parent in the first place because they had the baby on accident. But iPad kids.
We're iPad parents. If you try to give us some kind of advice and you don't have kids.
I don't have kids, but I get to work with yours. And let me fucking tell you, I know exactly which students in my classroom have an iPad at home and which ones don't. Your child may be able to sing the ABCs and recite it perfectly, or count to 10 or 20 or more than that, but do they have fine motor skills? Are they able to use a pincer grasp in day-to-day tasks? Not to mention, more than often, children who have unlimited screen time at home have behavioral issues in the classroom that you don't see at home because there's more students and less attention on them in a classroom environment than there is at home. I'm all for using iPads at the grocery store, on a car drive, but there is no need for your child to be on an iPad every single day. Do you not want children? Is that not the whole point? Why are you giving them an iPad instead of interacting with them?
Well, that gets into a lot of people having kids on accident and then getting married and divorced. And like I said, so what's good? I'm spending as much time as you. I'm probably spending more time face to face interacting with your child than you are yourself as the parent, because you're at work all day and you're coming home at like 5, 6 o'clock. You're cooking dinner. You're giving the kid the iPad, and then you put the kid to bed, and then you go do your adult things. So if we're being real here, there's a lot of teachers and people who work with children who are having more interactions with your own kid than yourself. So let's cut it here.
But what I do have is the truth.
To promise that we are not going to raise iPad children, please.
As a Gen Z who majored in education for 1 semester and worked in childcare for about 8 or 9 years, and who has many younger relatives, I think I speak for many of us when I say that Gen Alpha, or the iPad kid generation, is so far an absolute terrifying nightmare to deal with. And I want to talk about this today. And I know people say this about every young generation, it's kind of like a rite of passage for aging, but it is an epidemic to the point where teachers who have taught their entire lives are just up and quitting their jobs now because they can't handle these kids anymore.
And that's an important note. Everyone's like, oh, well, every generation has said, oh, these kids nowadays, pause. We are seeing something in real time that You have teachers who have been teaching their entire lives quitting in droves. Daycare teachers quitting in droves. Like, you have all these people like ringing the alarm. Like, there's something going on.
Of course, there are other issues like benefits and pay, but the main reason when polled for most teachers is the children's behavior of recent years. Main issues we're finding with Gen Alpha, which to be clear was born between 2010 and 2025, and most of their parents are either millennials or Gen Xers, is that they're having extreme social issues and they have like little to no mannerisms. The iPad kids are out of control. I'm not lying when I tell you, as someone who used to nanny for a lot of families, I have some crazy stories, but the families that were the easiest to manage were the families that extremely controlled screen time for their kids. I think a big issue is that these kids are using screens at a rate we've never historically seen before, and these parents are replacing like parenting and babysitters with iPads.
Yeah.
Like even Gen Z didn't have this level of access to the internet.
Gen Alpha is the first generation to really grow up with a screen in their face pretty much since birth, and we've never had to go through that before.
Generation as a whole is having reduced attention span and concentration, so that might be why like ADHD diagnoses seem to be going up and up. They spend less time socializing in person, and this one I've seen the most with the kids in my life is less development of creativity and imagination. The kids I've watched over the years have no interest in coloring and building, and they just want to sit on their iPads and watch Netflix and play apps and games.
And that's so sad because I loved my childhood outside. I love playing with Lincoln Logs. Me and my friends used to play Jackass. We saw Jackass on TV, and we would go outside. Oh, my childhood. We would go outside and like just do stunts, like ride our dirt bikes, build mounds, or ride down a hill inside a giant tire we found. Like, we would just be outside. Like, I got my first cell phone, a little track phone, little Nokia thing when I was in 3rd grade, but I only could call my mom because like I had my little points or whatever, and that was it. Like, I was always outside, and I feel like you don't see kids outside nowadays. Like, where are the parks at? Where's all the bikes sitting outside the friend's house? Like, why is everybody just on this damn screen?
The worst families I ever had a nanny for were the families that allowed their kid like unregulated access to their iPads and whatnot because they just wanted to be on those 24/7, and it was a nightmare. These kids didn't want to go and play outside, they didn't do a lot of imagination play, and they never wanted to go and play with toys, they just wanted to sit and play on their apps. And I would watch them play on the apps just to see if it was really all that bad, but there was really like no creativity happening on those apps. And terrifyingly enough, if you tried to take this tech from these kids, they didn't know how to act.
And I have seen the apps out there that have little games built in, or you're able to learn how to read, whatever it may be. I get it, but again, like, this iPad shouldn't be treated like a babysitter. Like, the iPads, there are some good apps out there, but it's not everything.
When a parent didn't have proper boundaries or anything, because if you try and take an iPad out of an iPad kid's hand, not only will they throw a tantrum so large, but they will start physically hitting you. And the first few times this happened whilst I was nannying families, I was amazed because, like, who allows their kid to behave like this? Even as a child who would throw temper tantrums, like, I knew that you would never put your hands on someone who at least wasn't immediate family. There were some kids that had no problem even straight up hitting me in my face.
And this is what I mean by the confusion between gentle parenting, like the real gentle parenting, and the permissive and just uninvolved parenting. Because these parents that she's talking about, I think they're more so from the not involved and the permissive parenting. Because a gentle parent's like, hey, you shouldn't hit me in the face. No. I'm sorry, no, I don't see anything from the real gentle parenting that's doing that. Like, no, those kids are getting reprimanded. This is a new breed. People saying, oh, well, you still had Game Boys. We're not about to sit here and compare a Game Boy to an entire iPad. And even then, it was rare you saw Game Boys at dinner. Kids' behavior. As mentioned, the iPads and the uninvolved parenting is leading to a lot of behavior problems with our children.
I need to ask millennials, why are your kids so awful? And more importantly, why do you think it's so funny? Your kids cannot read. They cannot write. They are ill-mannered, and they're monsters. I was working my medical receptionist job the other day, and this woman walks in. You can tell she's a millennial. She's like 34. She has a yoga mat in one hand and her 4-year-old in the other. Her Satan spawn walked up to the counter, and I was like, hi. And there's a bunch of business cards just stacked up on the counter. You know, it's a medical office. And the kid knocks them all over and starts mixing up all the different business cards on the floor of the office.
Couldn't be me. If that was my child, they're gonna know that that was bad and wrong.
I look over at her mother, thinking she's gonna see this and be like, oh no, you can't do that. No, she looks up from her phone, looks at her daughter, and starts hysterically laughing and says, isn't she so cute?
Uninvolved parenting. Not gentle parenting, uninvolved permissive parenting.
Ma'am, I have to clean this later. If that were my kid, I would have yelled at it and then cleaned up the mess it made and then made it apologize to the receptionist. And I know millennials with children are going to hate this because they're the most self-righteous people on the planet, but maybe you should be less concerned about me and more concerned about the fact that your kid cannot read. When I was in second grade, I was getting assigned by my teachers at least 100 to 150 page books, me and my classmates. Your kid cannot read basic words or spell basic words, and you're cool with that. That is crazy to me. If you're not going to teach them how to read, that's fine. You know what? Not my circus, not my monkeys. But at least please teach them some manners.
Gotcha, bitch. Bingo. Tag him and dang him.